So when this episode is live, we just released this previous Monday, an episode with Micah Fink, who is the founder and CEO of Heroes and Horses, an organization helping veterans, military veterans, adapt and re-entry into civilian life after their deployments. They're mostly dealing with PTSD, and it's a 40-day journey in the mountains of Montana. Takes them up there. They're riding horses. They're eating, real strict diet. They're doing boxing. They're training. They're working out every day. They do this thing called a sweat lodge, which sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just basically a sauna, and you go in there, and it's like a spiritual type.
It's a Native American tradition.
Yeah, Native American tradition.
And you sweat out, but it takes you to a place. It's almost like fasting. It's kind of the same. It's like a clarity. It takes you to a place where like just mentally you get to places that just normally you're not.
And so, and the goal is after that 40 days is that you've discovered who you are. You discovered your true purpose.
Yes.
You discovered your true why you're here and what your role is here on earth, and how do you use your abilities, your talents, your interests to better other people.
And I think, one of the things, and this, by the way, the episode, if you haven't listened to it, is fascinating. And we didn't talk much about, what they're doing in Montana, but like just the conversation itself. But one of the things that I loved was, and I wish that some more of these like nonprofits approached it this way. It was like, look, we're not going to leave room for excuses. Like, you can accomplish everything. Like, because remember, he said something like, there's no such thing as PTSD. Like, you're allowing that to take control of you, which is totally contrary, like, to what you're hearing. And it was just fascinating how they go through that, and you are in control. And they put you in circumstances that are so hard and difficult. Like, hey, you're going to be riding over these next 2 days. You're going to be riding at least 100 miles on horses. Yeah. Or, over this week, you got 500 miles logged on a horse. I mean, like, stuff that's like wild that you don't think is that hard, but like, if you don't ride all the time, go ride 10 miles. Tell me how that feels.
Yeah, we did a deal for a company work thing, and it was only like, 2 hours that we were on that horse? And I was scared the whole time.
Pissed because y'all cut it off at an hour because it was too hot. I'm like, let's go. Like, we literally made it one pasture, and you guys are like, oh, it's too hot.
No,
go back.
For me, it had zero to do with heat and 100% to do with fear that I was on an animal.
Terrified. Yeah,
I had zero control of this thing. He had his mind of his own, did his own thing. And I was terrified. I was ready to be done.
Have you watched Yellowstone?
I have.
Have you seen the clip where Ryan Bingham and Beth Dutton, and he holds her from behind, and he's like, yeah.
I don't remember this.
That's why Rip doesn't like him.
Why didn't you hold me from behind?
Well, because you didn't give me the opportunity because you just left. He's like, hey, how does that feel? Like you're going to hurt me. Oh, how does it feel now? Like you're nervous and like, ew. He goes, a horse can feel a fly on its ass. Imagine all he's feeling from you when you're on the horse. So when you're on the horse,
I get that.
You being panicked and being a little, little sissy la.
Don't you gender me. Don't you assume my gender.
Of course not going to respond.
Yeah.
You got to tell that horse what to do.
No, I know. I get it. I've heard that. Like, it sense your fear. That's like telling me, like, don't be scared to jump out of a plane. Like, I'm scared to jump out of a plane. I'm scared to get on a big old beast that I have no control over. Anyway, that's not what this episode's about. Anyway, so that was an hour.
Fascinating,
and they do that for
but it was
40
a fascinating conversation that we had, and just their approach. And I was like, dude, Micah, like, can I come do this? Because just what they're doing with these guys is just incredible. And I just think more people need these types of experiences to show you, okay, I can accomplish it. Yeah. I do control it. I can control my mind more than I give myself credit. Yeah. So it was awesome.
Yeah, and I wrote down a couple of thoughts and notes that I took from that, because we actually went to lunch with them as well and had a 2-hour conversation before we even pressed record. So my notes are actually from that as well, and just he's such an intelligent person. He's not the stereotypical Navy SEAL that you think of, that you have in your mind. Yeah. He's a deep thinker. He's very thoughtful with what he says. He doesn't just fly off the cuff. He's thought about, because he's spent so much time alone.
Yeah.
He's thought about why he thinks what he thinks.
What did he say? He said he is alone. What was it? It was like 60 days out of the year that he doesn't speak to a soul.
Yeah. Well, and on these retreat, he does 2 or 3, maybe 4 of these
they do 4
year, 4 a year.
Of them a year.
And part of it is by yourself, not talking. So he spent a lot, and that was the first thing I wrote down is knowing thyself. That's the theme of this year's events is know thyself. And that's knowing your talents, your abilities, your preferences, your weaknesses, your strengths, and your interests. And how many of us know ourselves intimately? Man. How many of us give ourselves the time, whether we give ourselves the quiet time or we put ourselves in situations where we're forced to learn about ourselves? How many of us do that on a daily basis?
And I would argue almost none of us. It takes an intentionality, because who do we think we are? Like our culture right now, like when you describe yourself, what perspective is that coming from? And this is a legit question. Like if you were to say, okay, I'm Ben, this is who I am.
It comes from what others say or think about me.
What you hear people tell you about yourself.
Yep.
And I think of that, like I always think, oh yeah, good communicator, thoughtful, or extremely ridiculously good looking. Totally.
But it's not my fault.
But like all you do is regurgitate things that you hear about yourself, and very few of us take the time to actually, who knows us better than ourselves? Mm-hmm. So why are we letting other people dictate?
Well, truly, other people do know us better than we know ourselves, because we don't give ourselves the time to do that.
Well, thank you. Yes, you're right. But I mean, really though, like nobody's in our head all day long. Nobody. So what we do is we hear what somebody says, and then we try to live up to those expectations that other people put on us. And they're not even us.
Yeah.
So I agreed. Like know thyself. That shook me.
Yeah. That was the theme of the show for sure for me.
Yeah.
Was the realization that I do not take enough time to truly understand. Because if I did, then I wouldn't struggle as much with, identity.
Yeah.
Or what am I after? Or if I actually gave myself time and permission and space to figure out who I truly am.
And I would say you're fairly intentional, but I think with you, it's like, all right, what are my goals? What are my aspirations?
For me, my quiet time is more about what can I accomplish, less than it is what can I discover about myself.
Yeah.
It's more about what can I get done here to progress versus can I just sit in silence. Yeah. Darren even touched on this. He went on a hunting trip. He said this on the episode, and it was the first time. And Darren's, somebody I think of immediately when I think of this is he said for the first time he was by himself, quiet, and he didn't like it. He's not sure he truly likes himself in that moment. Darren's a go-go guy. Like there's very little downtime for him. He's always to the next thing. His mind is constantly cluttered with the next, and a lot of us live life that way.
Yep.
And that was Micah's point, was giving yourself the space and the time, intentionality to discover who you really are.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. And Tiffany and I are like this too, is, hey, we have a free Saturday.
How can we fill it?
What are we going to do to fill it? And it's just, one of those things that.
Boredom is not a thing anymore.
No.
We've replaced boredom with these phones and the screens, and very rarely are you ever bored because you don't have to be anymore. And boredom is where creativity thrives.
Yeah. Tiffany did this thing, and I may have talked about it, I can't remember, but she did this thing. It's a company called Sparrow. And so she's actually in the Dallas area, and she took a bunch of NFL wives, and she does this like identity mission statement training. And it's a pretty intense deal. It's a couple days. She went to Denver, and then she actually had to come back to Dallas to finish it. But you literally walk through your entire story, like childhood, adolescence, young adult. Like you walk through everything. You walk through trauma. You walk through success. You walk through, and And at the end of it, you come out with your personal mission statement, like who you are and why you were created, right? Like why God created you the way that he did, why the things that happened to you did, what strengths, what weaknesses all came from that. And like Tiffany finished that. She's like, I've had things that I've like addressed, but like I've never taken the time to really actually like, I've told my story. I'll like throw it out there. Like I do it all the time, but it's the rehearsed, over and over. The same thing that I tell everybody. And like, she's like, it's the first time I actually got to know myself.
Yeah.
And it was crazy, like coming out of that and Heroes and Horses is similar to this, right? There's more physicality, I think, of just the audience that it caters to. But the Sparrow deal, and her name's Rachel Joy, is just unbelievable. And I got to actually sit in the last session, and she like storyboards your entire. So literally on a whiteboard, there's a picture of your life. Like if you could create a picture, and it's the craziest deal. But again, like I've never gone through that. I've never like walked through. Well,
unless you're like on a podcast or something telling your story.
But even
you might tell bits and pieces of your story, but you don't ever tell the whole thing.
But even so, I love Dak. Like I think Dak's a great guy. But it's an interview. If you're on a podcast, no matter what, it's an interview. Like you're not as I think we create an environment here for guests to really kind of share. And a lot of them say, I've never shared this actually on a podcast. I've never said this. Like cool. Like we feel good when people say that, but like everybody's guarded.
Yeah.
Like it's a rehearsed, filtered, like shell of a story of who they really truly are. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, like it's like, and I say Dak Prescott, like he has mastered the perfect answer on interviews.
Yeah.
Like that's not who he is as a person.
Yeah. Well, so, he has to be so guarded, right? Yeah, from a marketing standpoint.
And that's a different level, but honestly, it's the same concept.
That's why we don't interview a lot of athletes on this podcast, is because of that reason right there. They've got to be so guarded with their answers and so buttoned up, and they're afraid that their PR guy's going to come and shut them off. So anyway, that was one that stuck out to me. Another thing that stuck out to me, and it kind of leads to what you're talking about, is living off of past accomplishments and the need to change the story of what you did in the past to remain relevant today. Again, he didn't say this as much on air as he did before. He was hating on a lot of people that we look up to. Yeah. Meaning the story's changed over the years. Whatever happened originally, early on in combat or whatever scenario, he's talking about that's not really how it went down. Yeah. But what they do, what people do, and we all do this, we add something to the story. Add a little flavor to it. Add another element, another detail, so that we don't fall out of relevance. Yeah. If my identity is based on, like in our scenario, being a football player, of course my stories are now made, I freaking broke my leg and still finished the game. Yeah. Did you really? Like, you had a slight ankle tweak. Yeah. No, I broke my leg. Like, the story changes because you got to stay relevant. And this happens a lot in athletics. It happens a lot in the military. It happens a lot of our past accomplishments we try to regurgitate and bring back to the surface so that people still think that we're cool and we identify as whatever it is that we used to do. Yeah. That was another interesting.
And we believe it because it's just subtly tweaked, and we told it so many times, and it's tweaked and it's tweaked and it's tweaked. And we believe that we're actually telling the truth. Yeah. And again, I don't think it's a deliberate lie, but it is, it's not a pure steak, right? If you're throwing a little Montreal seasoning, a little garlic salt, a little pepper, like you put a little extra on it. Yeah. And I had never thought of it that way. And I mean, I'm guilty of it. I know, and I've heard, you hear that story like, wait a minute, I was there. Yeah. Definitely is not. Yeah. Definitely not how it went down.
And even if you're not changing the story, like for example, I was back home this weekend. A buddy of mine, the quarterback that I played with in college, was inducted to the school's Hall of Fame. So I was back, and that's all the Hall of Fame ceremony is about, is old accomplishments. Yeah. And even in that scenario, I'm seeing these people I haven't seen in 10 years, and they're coming up to me and, talking about, the good old days. Yeah. And even 12 years later, it felt good when somebody complimented the stuff I accomplished 12 years ago. It's like, I'm 34 years old. Yeah. I don't have a football accomplishment since I was 22. Yeah. And yet I still get that dopamine hit 12 years later of the things that I did that long ago. Yeah. So it's easy for me to still see myself as an athlete or a football player. That was a long time ago.
Gosh, I know.
And yet it still feels good when somebody brings that up.
Yeah.
And so that's easy. That's one of the things I took away from him. It's very easy to do that. It's very comfortable to do that, to live off of past accomplishments, to stay relevant today. Yeah. And then lastly, and there was obviously a lot of takeaways, but lastly has nothing to do with either one of those two. It's a little bit of a left turn, is the importance of preparedness.
Yeah.
So again, I forget exactly how much he shared on the podcast and what was in our conversation before, and I'll kind of run together. But he lives in Montana in a small rural little town away from the town on his own acreage, grows his own vegetables, harvests his own meat, so he hunts, and he doesn't go to the grocery store for meat.
And then goats too, so he'll raise goats and sheep.
Raises his own goats and sheep, has his children at his house, like literally he births his children at home, homeschools all 5 of his kids. So he is completely, his 16-year-old daughter doesn't have a cell phone. He is completely disconnected from everyday life online.
I mean, he's putting like a geothermal water system in so that, solar can run all. I mean, So he is completely gone to the side of, I don't want to be reliant, dependent on any system. Mm-hmm. I want to be self-reliant 100%. And maybe I'm never going to go that extreme with it, but it did remind me that when we have a freeze and power's out for a week, I am incapable of anything. Yeah. I have no hunting skills. I have no survival skills. Life has been very easy for me. I've fully embraced 2022, the comforts of 2022. Yeah. Well, and I mean, we talked about just the food situation, right? Like
and how delicate it is.
Scary that could be in the near future, because it is being controlled by, a handful of individuals or of corporations, right? And so like if they want to shut it off, I mean,
think about the formula.
Millions and millions of people could not afford food.
Think about the baby formula shortage we had a couple months back, and people were scrambling, driving hours just to get a bottle of formula for their baby. Like, how scary of a situation is that you can't provide food for your infant? And there's a lot of reasons why people can't breastfeed. So you people out there that say, well, they'll just breastfeed. There's a lot of reasons you can't.
Right.
But the point is, that's a system in place that you're very reliant on. Grocery stores, same thing. We are just assuming that when I go to Kroger, Target.
Think about how inconvenient it is if they're out of something.
Or they're out of something. I'm just assuming if I show up, it's going to be on the shelf for me and I'm going to be able to buy it. Yeah. What if it's not? Exactly. The toilet paper shortage of COVID. It wasn't available. People were making a run on it. What do you do? The gas shortage a few years ago here in Dallas. Hours line down the block to get gas.
Every gas station was out of gas.
Because every gas station was at a gas station. What do you do in that scenario? Yeah. So again, a lot of us have, and it's not there is an element to keep the economy going. You've got to feed into the system in that way. Yeah. But I think the point is, the reminder to me was, hey, if one little thing goes wrong, I'm up a creek. I don't have a lot of, backup plans. So it was just in my mind of, okay, I need some contingency. If I want to take care of my family, maybe I do need to go on a hunt and learn how to do that and kill a big elk so that I have meat in my freezer for the next year. Mm-hmm. Maybe I do need to learn, some basic survival skills. So if a man-made or a natural disaster comes, people in Florida, the hurricane, what do they do? Yeah. Right? You board up your house and then you head off. Then where do you go? Yeah. What do you do? Do you have these plans in place to take care of your family if disaster strikes, whether man-made or natural disaster?
And so, kind of in preparation for Micah coming on is you've sent me a couple podcasts, Mike Force.
Yep.
And he's very much on that like preparedness side of it too. And like he just said, look, there's a handful of simple things. Like you don't have to be this like crazy doomsday prepper, right? Mm-hmm. Building a house underground and like all this stuff. Like you don't have to, but there's a handful of things that take a very little amount of effort just in case. Like, hey, if something does happen, where do I go?
Yep.
Okay. How do I get there not taking the major freeways that Google Maps is going to take me on? Do you have something that if cell towers go down, and Micah brought this up, like the whole solar flare deal.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if we get hit with this electromagnetic blast from a solar flare, which, by the way, has happened over and over and over and over in our history of this planet, is we're almost like overdue. Mm-hmm. I mean, it happened in the late 1800s, and it took out the telegraph, took it out. They're saying if it happens now, equivalent to what it was then, it could take us 11 years to recover from that. 11 years.
Yeah. What are you doing the next 11 years?
Right. So again, not saying like you have to be this crazy, but like, hey, maybe have a physical map. Maybe have just a handful of reserve containers of fuel. Maybe have some water on hand. Maybe, look, I've got some non-perishable food that like I can't, maybe a bag that like, hey, I can just grab and I can go if we need to go. Like, just like things that you're like, you're not like this crazy psycho. Like a lot of people make, okay, but like, it's not that far out of the question. Like if you think through some of these things, like a couple things could have happened a little bit differently, and we could have already been there in the past.
Well, what about something more common than a solar flare? A house fire.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here thinking, I've got a 2-story house. I don't even have ladder, like the safety ladders you can roll out. I haven't even talked to my boys about what do you do in the scenario of a fire. That's something that, again, that's not doomsday prep. That's something that could happen.
Yeah.
And yet there's no contingency plan in my house if that happens. And so we've talked about this before. You don't change typically until you feel pain.
Yeah.
In this scenario, it would be nice if we would make changes or at least put contingencies in place before we felt the pain. And that's what I took away is, okay, I need to start being more thoughtful. Because there's probably going to be something happens this winter.
Yeah.
Something's going to get, we're probably going to get power shut down at some point. How am I going to be prepared for that? What am I going to do? So again, maybe I'm not building a bunker or as Mike Glover on his Mike Fort Pod, a bug out vehicle where I'm able to escape. Yeah. But it's having that rollout ladder. It's having a plan for my kids. Hey, if this happens, hey, if you're home alone and a stranger that type stuff, just preparedness. Yeah. What are you ready for? Yeah. That was a big takeaway for me. So no, I'm not going to go off and move to rural Montana, although it'd be nice sometimes.
I'd do it.
I'm still going to live my life here, but am I ready for if something goes down? Yeah. And that was another big takeaway for me.
It's good.
So those are my 3 big. I'm sure you guys had different takeaways from the conversation. He, like I said, was almost too intelligent to capture.
Well, he was so intelligent. You're just like, I'm an idiot. Like and again, the one thing that I really love about like our military training is they do put an emphasis on history. And we've gone so far away from teaching history to our kids because it's like, there's so much that we can learn from failures in the past or successes in the past, and we just completely ignore it now. I feel like unless Hollywood tells us what it is, like we're not learning about history to the level that we should. And his intimacy with like past events and trends and things, I'm like, man, I really wish that I had the intentionality that he did about learning from others. That's
probably the best word to describe as he's intentional. Yeah. You can tell he's done a lot of work on himself and really put in the time. So hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Yeah. Again, we released that on Monday and had some good takeaways. Go support Heroes and Horses. They're on Instagram at Heroes and Horses. He's off the grid. We had to reach out to his people to get a hold of him. So because he's living his life. He's not online. So, but you can support his organization, Heroes and Horses. They're always looking for donors. Yeah. They're always looking for volunteers. Go get involved with Heroes and Horses. Before we get out of here, we do want to thank our partners. Speaking of knowing yourself and being ready for anything, good sleep is a big part of that. Yeah. And our partners, Sleep Number, provide us with that great sleep. Even when your 2-year-old comes in at 3 o'clock in the morning and bugging you, at the very least, I'm getting great sleep before that moment. And then after that moment, once I get them settled in an hour later. Yeah. So go check out sleepnumber.com. Again, Tyler was talking about it. The foot warmer, adjust the bed. All this is controlled on your smartphone, on your app. Speaking of relying on systems.
I can't move my bed.
What if my app doesn't work? How do I prepare?
How do I incline my feet?
So anyway, go check out sleepnumber.com, or they have retail stores all over the country. And then November 13th, Choctaw Casino Resort, Tyler, Darren, and myself will be up there live watching the Cowboys versus the Green Bay Packers. Unfortunately, Cowboys took a tough loss this week, but they're still in a good position, still having a great year. The Packers actually aren't that great, but anytime you got Aaron Rodgers, you got a chance.
Yeah, you got to.
So it's going to be a great game. We're going to, even if it's not a great game, the league up there, the sports bar up there,
make it a great experience.
There's a million different TVs going around. It's going to be an awesome experience. So come join us up there at Choctaw Casino Resort. Even if you don't like football or sports, tons of stuff to do.
Where is it again?
Choctaw Casino Resort.
Yeah, where is Choctaw?
Oh, it's just a short drive up 75, Durant, Oklahoma.
Durant, Oklahoma.
If you get on 75 in Dallas and head north, you run right into it.
Yep.
It's fantastic. So come see us. Wish Tyler happy birthday. It's his birthday weekend. Come say hello, and we'll buy you a hamburger or something up there.
The pretzel was good.
A pretzel, something
Couldn't
like
have
that.
It last time.
So, yeah, that's right.
I have a feeling you're going to make up for lost time on the foods.
That's right. That's right. Any closing thoughts?
No, man. Go back and listen. If you have not already, go back and listen to that episode. It really, man. It could have been a 6-hour podcast easily.
Yep. Oh, and yeah, one more plug on that. He did, and we mentioned this on the episode. He did a 4-hour marathon with Jocko earlier this year that went through his entire story. We touched a little bit on his story. We didn't have that much time with him, but they went through his entire. So if you want to hear his entire story, go to the Jocko podcast. Just type in Micah Fink, and you'll be able to find that as an incredible story, the way he grew up. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your week.
And
a great weekend, and we will see you next week.